Namaskar. Welcome to Prakash on Basics. I'm Prakash Zog. We've been talking of Sanskars. Let's look into one of the major, or rather the most important one, which is the Vivaha Sanskar or the marriage Sanskar. Before we go into the Sanskar itself, we need to go into a little bit of the background of the whole aspect of marriage. One of the most important functions of life is to reproduce. It is a major biological need, a basic drive, and one of the major objectives of life itself. So we need to understand the evolution of this process itself and then how it leads to the sanskar. See, natural selection is and resulting into evolution is a very slow process. Uh, with intelligence of humans developing and their understanding of interrelations between man and woman, uh, people have speeded up this process of evolution by suitable choices that they made. With the development of social structure, the concept of family and its relationships gained more importance. The couples naturally led to being life partners, and from it finally evolved the concept of what marriage itself was. Every religion, race, tribe, culture has its own marriage norms, but nowhere has it been analyzed and interpreted as meticulously as in Hinduism, in the Sanatan Dharma. And that I'm talking of is an evolution and development that took place nearly 5,000 years ago. That development has culminated into the most important of the sanskars, the Vivaha Sanskar, the major stabilizing factor of the social fabric, and therefore a major part of Sanatana Dharma. It is a ritual known as the Vidhi with a moral, ethical, social binding. And it is a commitment and responsibility pledged by the sacred fire, something that has to be followed up to death. The concept of what marriages are and its objectives are mentioned even in the Rigved. The Rigved comments on the reasons for marriage as good progeny, uh, as a biological necessity uh, to obtain and achieve uh, dharma and yajna rights. Uh, it also increases your value in terms of the wealth of the dharma and praja, that is the populace. So that is an essential part of marriage. It's not a contract, it's a pledge, and it is sanctified by fire. It is to be followed by both the male and the female. It is morally, ethically, socially binding, lifelong commitment governed by age old laws. Laws that have been put forward in the Smrutis. Grihastashram, the part of family section of our life, uh, is the most important part, the foundation of all social structure. And its foundation is obviously marriage. So, marriage as a sanskar uh, gives social recognition and sanctity to male female relationship. Uh, there are many factors that help in stabilizing this relationship in the form of marriage. But the relations and the type of relations that are accepted today and as were proposed by the Smritis were not so in the Vedic period, because there we sometimes find male female relationships that are beyond the sanskar norms that are put forward today, whether they are analogies and similarities to nature and other things is something that we need not bother of just now. So this then becomes the most important sanskar of all humans. In spite of being a patriarchal society, uh, in Hinduism, both husband and wife are equally important. It is the great sage Manu in Manusmriti who laid down the laws of vivaha or marriage. Um, 3.2s, 3.20 to 3.34. So roughly around 14 to 15 shlokas have been dedicated to specifying and identifying 8 different types of vivahas by Manu. These are also mentioned in the Atharva Veda, in some other smrutis, and they have been commented on in the various Dharma Shastras and smrutis also. The laws were basically to help sanctify the various relationships, willing or unwilling, that took place in society. He ensured that women got their necessary status in spite of some forced, illegitimate relationship that had been established. Nowadays, we find so many people criticizing Manu without realizing or without having read his actual works and the importance and the greatness that he has put forward so many, many, many years ago. People who criticize him still follow the laws laid down by him in a variety of forms without realizing that these are the laws that have been put forward by Manu. His rules tend to prevent inbreeding. Um, these are meticulously followed even among Hindus who have been converted to other religions. In fact, according to him, the husband is incomplete without his wife. He does not have the right to perform rituals without the presence of his wife. He cannot perform a yajna successfully with if his wife is not present. Manu has also put forward the rule that unless the girl achieves puberty, she should not be married off. So these are all sensible laws that have been put forward so many, many years ago. Manu and the Dharma Shastras refer to 8 different types of vivahas, but only the first 4 have true social acceptance and are given substantial status and credibility. The reason is obvious. The society then was not just the Aryans or the Aryas. There were non-followers of Hinduism, uh, tribals and others, and there were other different. There were relationships between different communities that did not follow or adhere to the laws put forward by the Dharma Shastras and so forth. So Manu has laid down laws to encompass all this in the different types of marriages that he's talked of. Narasmriti, Atharva Ved, many others comment on these 8 types of marriages that are accepted in Hinduism. Their status and acceptance in society gradually decreases from the topmost to the lowest and the one that is not to be followed under different cases. I'll first list out only the names. The first one, of course, is the Brahma Vivaha, then the Daiva Vivaha, the Arsha Vivaha, the Prajapatya Vivaha, the Asura Vivaha, the Gandharva Vivaha, the Rakshasa Vivaha, and the Paishachik Vivaha. I told you there are about 14 shloks that Manu puts forward, identifying and describing what these different types of vivahas are and what are the rules and regulations to be followed there. Let's try and understand them, starting from the best one to the one that is uh, not to be not to be followed by anyone. The first one is known as the Brahma Vivaha. Its main objective is enhancement of knowledge and its pursuit, uh, resulting into obviously good progeny, which would continue to follow this norm. Uh, it obviously means that the husband and wife are both to be expected to be quite educated, knowledgeable. And so, naturally, in most cases, these were Brahmins. And so, it this form of knowledge, this form of marriage was more common in case of Brahmins. Uh, Manu, in his statements, mentions that the father must select a groom of high education, good character, and morals, invite him, worship him, and then offer his daughter in marriage without expecting anything in return. This was true in case of the girl who was well qualified and the bride groom equally good. And so this is rated as the highest type of marriage. It was the girl was to be handed over or given in marriage salankrut, means with ornaments and gifts to the husband. Uh, this form is not really the way in which marriages are conducted today. The second type of marriage is known as the Daiva Vivaha. Uh, the father is to observe the best place to find good grooms, and that was at a yajna, where the father is to observe the abilities of the boy, select the best one out of them. These were all known as rotviges, and he is to select the best of them in a particular yajna, either performed at his place or at other places, and um, then, without expecting anything in return, offer his daughter in marriage to such a boy. This is also said to be uh, a salankrut, or with gifts and ornaments for the girl. This was known as the Daiva Vivaha. Uh, Nowadays, yajnas are not so common, so this particular method of choosing a good match no longer exists. There are other places, good locations where such a hunt still goes on. The third category of marriage is called as the Prajapatya Vivaha. The prime objective of this particular uh, pattern of marriage is to obtain a very large and the best possible progeny from both of them. After a marriage of this sort, the the father is to request the bridegroom, may you perform all your duties of dharma and live together and achieve everything possible in dharma. This obviously meant following all the laws of dharma that were expected. and develop develop all the four basic traits which include artha, kama, and moksha by the two of them together. So developing families, increasing in number, and following the norms of the society is what was expected in this particular type of marriage. The fourth type of marriage was known as the Arsha Vivaha. In this particular type of marriage, it was a payment had to be made by the father, or rather to the father, um, in the form of a pair of a bull and a cow, one pair or two, or a pair of bullocks in addition, uh, in exchange for the girl who was to be given in what is typically referred to as Kanyadan, the gift from the father of his daughter to the groom. The wealth to be given was fixed. Only one or two pairs of bullocks or a bull and a cow. This was to compensate for the loss that the family had incurred because of parting of their daughter. These first four that I have talked up to now are the ones that are of a higher stature and quite well accepted among the society at that time. The next type and the next four, of course, are of a slightly lower stature. Out of them, the first one is known as the fifth, naturally, is known as the Gandharva Vivaha, sometimes Gandharva Vivaha also. Um, it is by mutual attraction between the boy and the girl, uh, love marriage as is typically referred to even now. Uh, it is driven by passion, by love, by attraction, by lust, so many factors. You see something very good which impresses you at that particular point, and then you get married to the person. It was very common among uh, dancing and music communities, the Gandharvas at that time. Also, Gandhar was an area from where this trend is said to have come. But that's just one of the many aspects that are talked of about this. Uh, there are no rituals in this. There is no Kanyadan or any other vidhi that is carried out. And the consent of the parents is not expected in this case, not sought for also. The the Shakuntala Dushyanta Vivaha that we talk of in the the classics is also of the same type. In today's world, uh, cohabitation or those live-in relationships that we talk of today are of the same type. There is no moral, ethical, or legal binding as such, and no commitments, no rituals, uh, no responsibilities to a very large extent. So naturally, whether these marriages are very lasting or not is a factor to be thought of. Uh, the next type of marriage is said to be what is known as the uh, Rakshas Vivaha. This Rakshas Vivaha and its counterpart, which is known as the Asura Vivaha, are the next two that must be talked of. Asura is a little higher than the Rakshas Vivaha. In the Asura Vivaha, the groom is to give enough wealth to the relatives and the community or the family of the girl till they are satisfied, and then effectively purchase the girl and then get married to her. In one of the smrutis, it is specified that the groom in such cases is of questionable character, maybe many a times unsuitable for the bride. And the Rakshas Vivaha, the seventh one, it is the abduction of the girl from her home forcefully as she cries and weeps after being beaten and taken away from her family and then marrying her. It is quite possible that there would be a clash with the girl's family and they could be destroyed or slaughtered in the process. Very cruel process, no consideration for the girl. And the relationship established in this manner was said to be the Rakshas Vivaha. And the last one is known as the Paishacha Vivaha, abducting or influencing a girl, taking, ruining her modesty when she is sleeping unconscious or intoxicated, and then establishing a permanent relationship with her is what is referred to as the Paishacha Vivaha. It is the wickedest, the most immoral, and the basest form of marriage, according to Manu. You must realize one thing, they are all referred to as Vivaha. So she, the girl, the woman, even if forcefully made to comply, had certain status in the society, and that was given because of these recognitions as a Vivaha. Obviously, the best one was on top, and the wife of that nature was the one who had maximum status in the family also. At that time, the Varna concept, the Varnashram concept, and the Jati concept was equally predominant. Uh, Everybody was aware of their gotras or lineages. The four jatis were Brahman, Kshatriya, Shudra, Vaishya, and Shudra, as I had mentioned long back in our discussions. But you must also realize that uh, remaining within your uh, jati uh, was not always true. Some marriages were between different Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. So, such mixed marriages had also to be identified in some way, and they were classified into what is typically referred to as the Anulom and Pratilom type of Vivahas. The society was male dominant, so the reference was with respect to the male of higher Varna marrying a girl of lower Varna. In that case, like for example, a Brahmin boy marrying a Kshatriya or a Vaishya or a Shudra girl. In this case, it was him marrying somebody of lower stature, and so this was referred to as Anuloma, in the direction of flow, like the hair being patted down. And if a boy or a male of a lower class married a girl of a higher caste or a class, then it was known as pratilom, against the normal flow of things. The in the Anulom Vivaha, where the higher caste person, male, marries a lower caste female, his own caste was retained by the progeny. Whereas in the reverse case, the lower caste man marrying a higher caste girl resulted into a progeny that created a new jati or a new community or a different community without accepting the communities of the two. The first one, the Anulom one, is a very important pattern, and there are a lot of examples of uh, higher Brahmins marrying lower caste girls and resulting into Brahmins who are of very high stature. The best example of this is obviously Veda Vyas, where Parashar married a girl of a lower stature, but his son Vyas is rated among the highest of Brahmins. So Anulom and Pratilom were the two additional type of marriage categories that were talked of. But the Smrutis and the norms laid down there were quite strict about other issues also. Uh, unless the girl had achieved puberty, you could not marry her, was expected. So she had to be fertile enough to go into the responsibility of becoming a member of a family. Uh, all these marriages don't have equal social standings. Uh, there is the lower categories did not have all that much amount of social standing as far as the women were concerned. There was one more aspect that must be kept in mind, and that has become relevant even today. And its importance is to ensure that the progeny is of a higher biological status also. Inbreeding, as we know today, it has resulted into deterioration and enhancement of defects in children. This was thought of by the sages 5,000 years ago. And so, marrying in blood relations was not acceptable. All the families were split up into close relations were talked of as sapinda, those with your own bloodlines. So you couldn't marry a person from your same gotra or sapinda, that is of the same lineage. This extended to 7 families from the father's side and 5 families from the mother's side. So, if you think of it from today's point of view, we must look into how mathematically this works out. And it's valid even today. When I talk of my inheriting my genes, half my genes come from my father and half from my mother. So, one generation before is half, 2 generations before is 1/4, 3 generations before is 1/8, 1/16, 1/32, 1/64, 1/28, 1/28, 1/256, and so forth. So when I talk of 7 generations behind, it becomes 2 raised to 7, which works out to be 1/128 of the original genes land up with me. So there it was said that any relationship or family tree, 7 generations behind from father's side is acceptable because there's hardly any amount of genetic material that is passed on. They did not talk of genes in that sense then, obviously, but this concept was there. And when you talk of and that works out to be about 0.078, 1/128 works out to be 0.078% of the total amount of genes. And when I talk of 5 generations, it turns out to be 1/32, that is about 3%. So only beyond this you could marry. And you had to confirm that it was in accordance to your gotra. And there were 8 major gotras that were accepted all around, except I think for Kshudras, they were not assigned typically. They were the Vishwamitra, Jamadagni, Bharadwaj, Gautam, Atri, Vashishta, Kashyap, and Agastya. These were the 8 gotras. There were, of course, subcategories known as the Pravars that were also there. Many of our surnames are associated and they are also listed out in various texts to find out who is from your own gotra and so forth. So these norms were also put forward to ensure that there was no inbreeding that took place and the progeny was always of the best category. The categorization of progeny is also based on the type of marriage that takes place, the varnas that are there, the relationships that are there. There is a trend that marriages were carried out nowadays. There is a trend that in the mother's family or from the paternal uncle's family. But these were not valid as far as the original concepts prevailed at that time in the Smrutis. The Anulom Vivaha was lower than marrying in your own Gotra. And since uh, a, the female had to, or the wife had to consort, had to take part in yajnas, if she was from your own Gotra, then she had the first right to be your consort in a yajna. If it was, uh, if the prince had to be chosen, uh, the heir apparent, then if the wife was from your own gotra, the chances of her son being selected as the crown prince was more obvious. So all such norms also existed. Even then, paishachik vivahas were looked down upon. Pratilom vivahas were not considered to be very good. And these ladies then had a lower status and standing within the family itself. This is how the social structure of marriages worked. There were some exceptional situations also, and I must point them out too. Uh, Indians believed in horoscope to a very large extent, and so in the horoscopes were not very favorable. And if the marriage was not to be a very good one, the first marriage was not to be a very good one, then some special conditions were laid down. Uh, Out of this, the first type of marriage was known as the Kumbha Vivah. The girl was married to an earthen pot with water and with an idol of Vishnu inside. And this was her first marriage. And once this marriage was complete, the Kumbha, that is the earthen pot, was then broken off. And then that marriage was null. And she could then marry the suitable groom that was looked for her or seen fixed up for her. There was also similarly an Ashwastha Vivaha, where the girl was first married to an Ashwastha tree. There was one more type. It was known as the Arka Vivaha. Uh, if 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 the gentleman's first two wives had not survived, it was quite likely that the third one won't survive too. So the third time he was married to a tree again, and when that marriage was nullified, he was to marry or take in the third wife. So these were some additional different type of marriage patterns that were talked of. But these were only the nature of marriages. The actual Vivah Sanskar, the rituals, the vidhis, had a far more greater significance. And they were generally the same in most of the marriages. It is these that we must understand in greater detail. If you have liked whatever I have said, please like and subscribe to this channel. Pass on this information to your friends. Read a little more about these 8 types of vivahas and their applied areas. Uh, Look into the logic of why these were put forward and appreciate the beauty of the Smrutis, Manusmruti and others who gave such a high status to women. Till we meet again next time to discuss the actual Vivaha Sanskar. Till that time, Namaskar.